Good morning. My name is the Reverend Joseph Wilkin Tays. No, I am not here to be the new associate pastor of St. Clement's Church. Again, I'm representing this morning the first missionary priest of St. Clement's Church, Joseph Wilkin Tays. I was known to my congregation in the small community of El Paso as Parson Tays, or at least that's the name Ron Thompson and Bill Wade gave me when we first met. I love them both. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, but moved to Texas with my brothers who were Texas Rangers. This was all after the Civil War, of course, around 1867, when I was serving as a new roving priest in Bryan, Matagorda, Columbus, and Indianola, Texas. Unfortunately, it was around this time that my 24-year-old wife, Jeremiah, and our youngest son caught yellow fever and sadly passed away. After this, I was appointed chaplain to the Texas Senate under E.J. Davis, which provided me with a new focus at the time. But shortly after that new appointment, Judge Clark and Albert Fountain presented me with the challenge of bringing to the few people in El Paso the church's ministrations. Early in September 1870, me and my two boys, Eugene and Joseph, aged 9 and 7, started our trek from Austin to El Paso. It was a journey of over 500 miles that took us 1 month to accomplish. But know this, I won't judge you the next time you complain about having a connecting flight from Austin to El Paso. After we arrived in El Paso, we moved into an adobe structure and set up the corner room as our temporary quarters. The larger room at the rear was arranged as a chapel, which was about 14 by 30 feet. And in the east end was a square window about 4 feet from the floor. This window was covered with a canvas screen on which Senator Fountain painted a large shaded cross. In front of this screen, an altar was built, and the rest of the area was taken up with rough benches to seat a congregation. I conducted El Paso's first Protestant church service on October 9th, 1870. By January of 1871, I hired Giron to cast a copper bell that not only called the faithful to services, but also alerted the town to fires and other urgent situations. That same bell sits in the narthex of the church and still has bullet marks from rowdy citizens using it as target practice. Over time, our congregation grew to about 75 people in El Paso, but this number dwindled when the railroad construction came to a halt. In 1873, I married again to Sarah Perkins, but we found it necessary to leave the area in December of 1875 in a train of 12 prairie schooners. At the time, I was recorded saying, "I trust that my prayers for this place and people will sometime be answered, and that this spiritual wilderness will yet blossom as a rose." 5 years later, on September 1880, tragedy struck again as Mrs. Perkins Tays died in New York, leaving me and my sons alone once again. In the fall of 1881, I married a third time to Miss Viola Kimball. The railroads finally arrived in El Paso in 1881. Never forgetting the call by God to minister in the West, I returned to the border and bought land on Mesa Avenue, which was then called Utah Street, and built with my own hands and resources a church and rectory. The cornerstone of the new church was laid December 25th, 1881, and the church seated 150 people. The first service was conducted on February 12th, 1882. In those days, I wasn't paid much by the mission board, so to supplement my income, I became a county surveyor for El Paso, Pecos, and Presidio counties, using my education in civil engineering from King's College. In 1884, after conducting a funeral service for a victim of smallpox, I was afflicted with fever and was attended by Dr. Justice and Mrs. Tays. My son Joseph, on doctor's orders, gave me a hot bath, and the next day I broke out with black smallpox and passed away. My last words were, "There is a change taking place." Now, the Reverend Tays was buried in the Mundy lot at Concordia Cemetery in a rush during a violent thunderstorm without a service. A week later, Bishop Elliot arrived to conduct Reverend Tays' funeral, where the church overflowed with mourners. His marker in Concordia Cemetery reads, "The memory of the just is blessed." As you all can tell from the story, Tays was a man of tremendous energy and spiritual force, a natural leader of men. He helped and encouraged anyone, no matter what their race or creed was. He tended the sick and dying on both sides of the border. He was greatly beloved by all in this little frontier town. He even took part in the affairs of the city, and Tays Street in downtown El Paso is named after him. He is the second man who is honored by a bronze plaque above the main altar on the right of the Good Shepherd window. The inscription reads, "For Reverend Joseph Wilkin Tays, Pioneer." The other plaque honors Judge Gaylord Clark, who was introduced last week. These founders of our church are incredible examples to us of commitment, sacrifice, and perseverance as they forged their way into a desert wilderness to establish God's light in an often violent and lawless Wild West. Thank you.